All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. We are, sorry, I want to begin by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Elul, Ed and Faith Wolf and family for dedicating the Sherman Drushos this month in memory of our beloved father, grandfather, and great-grandfather Cyrus Wolf, Shalom ben Tzvi Hirsch. Another special Daf Yomi sponsorship today by Howie and Rachel Wiesenfeld in honor of Moshe Abramson's 40th birthday. Mazel tov, Moshe, incredible. May he continue to learn and grow for many years in good health. In good health. Moshe, Mazel tov ad me'er ve'esrim shanim tovos. All right, so with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful daf ahead of us today. Let's pick up. We left off on today's daf is Lamed Beis 32. It's really some incredible Gemara. We left off on Lamed Beis. We're going to pick up. We left off on Lamed Aleph. Today's daf is Lamed Beis 32. We left off on 31b, and we are going to pick up the Heicha Itmar, which is 5 lines up from the bottom. So both say we ended off with the Gemara's very interesting idea that although the Mishnah said that I cannot establish my Eruv Chatzeros, my Eruv Tchumen with a katan or a cheri shot of a cotton, right? It doesn't work. Halacha l'maisa, what I can do is I could send the Eruv in the hands of a cheri shot of a cotton. They can give it to a responsible adult, and that responsible adult could go ahead and create the Eruv for me. So the Gemara says, as long as what? As long as you see the cheresh shotev cotton actually deliver the Eruv to the responsible adult. The Gemara says, but how do I know the responsible adult is going to do what is asked of him? To which the Gemara said, Chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. The Gemara says there's a chazaka, there's a presumption that a shaliach does what he is charged to do. So which we know, a concept we've learned many times before. So the Gemara says, V'hecha itmar d'Rav Chizra Vichiel. So say, by the way, where do we know this idea that chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso? From where do we know this idea that we assume that the shaliach does what he's asked to do? So the Gemara says, this is actually very interesting. Nasno lapil, v'holicha lakov, v'holicho. So we'll say if you gave the Eruv to an elephant, and the elephant gave it to a donkey, to a monkey, and the monkey placed down the Eruv, ein ze Eruv. Ultimately, again, it's not an Eruv. So we'll say Rashi says over here, kofu pil. So if you have a monkey and an elephant, pamim shehem milumadim. Rashi says you could train them. You could train a monkey, you could train an elephant, so you train them to go ahead and deposit, hand an Eruv to each other. So you give it to the elephant gives it to the monkey places it down, it doesn't work. But if you go ahead and you give it to the elephant gives it to the monkey, and the monkey gives it to a person, and the person places the Eruv, harei ze Eruv. The Gemara says, but one second, how do you know that the elephant's going to give it to the monkey's going to give it to the person? To which the Gemara says, it's where you see the elephant give to the monkey give to the person. But how do you know that the responsible adult is actually going to receive it from the monkey and deposit it? There's a chazaka that a shaliach does his shlichus, Rabbi say. So it's a chazaka that when you are memana, when you appoint someone as an agent, that people fulfill their agencies. Incredible Gemara with incredible hashkafic ramifications as well, because each of us is on a shlichus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not just the Lubavitchers who get sent on shlichus, right? Every Jew is on shlichus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there's this yesod chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. There's always a chazaka that the shaliach carries out his shlichus. The Amr Rav Nachman b'shal Torah. Both say now here this is fascinating. Rav Nachman says b'shal Torah ein chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. Rav Nachman says this chazaka only applies to dirabanans. B'shal top of Lamed Beis, b'shal sofrim, chazaka oseh shlichos. So Rav Nachman says the chazaka that a shaliach does his shlichos only applies in rabbinic law. Does not apply in biblical. And I'll say now what does this mean? Look at Rashi. B'shal Torah in chazaka, kilomar lo samchinon achazaka ad dechazinon da'avad. So it says very simple. Rav Nachman says, in Doraisas, the only time shlichus works is when we actually see the shaliach do what he's supposed to do. But there's no chazaka that tells us that the shaliach did his job unless you saw him do his job. In Dirabanans, You could rely on a chazaka. Look at Rashi, top of Lamed Beis. B'chazak, b'shal sofrim. Samchinon acheskas shaliach di'inami lo avid lo chamer isura kigone ruvit chun. We'll say this is fascinating. See, Rav Nachman says like this. In the Araisas, I can't say, there's no chazaka that a shliach does a shlichus unless you see it. By dirabanans, we can assume a shliach does a shlichus. So we'll see, when you think about that for just a moment, it doesn't seem to make sense. A chazaka is a presumption of human behavior, in this case, right? A presumption that when you ask someone to do something, they did it. They do it, or they do it, right? That's what chazaka means. Chazaka means, if I ask you to carry a shlichus, I could assume you're going to do it. See, either I can assume or I can't assume. What do you mean? In Da'oraisas, you can't assume, but in D'Rabbanan, you can assume. Rashi says, no. The truth is, we pretty much never assume that people do what you ask them to do unless you see them actually do it. It's just when it comes to D'Rabbanans, if they don't do it, it's not such a big deal. It's fascinating. So let's say, first of all, it's an incredible insight into human nature, into the way Rav Nachman understands people. People will not do the things you ask them to do unless you're actually standing on top of them when they do it. It's fascinating. So the Gemara said, Rav Sheshes said, Echad zeh ve'echad zeh, chazak shliach oseh shlichuso. Rav Sheshes says, no, it's not true. Both in Da'araisas as well as the Rabbanans, we assume that there is a chazaka that people do their shlichus, that a shliach executes his agency. Amar Rav Sheshes, Minamin, Rav Sheshes says, how do I know that we hold chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso? By both the Rabbanans and the Oraisas. This nan mishekara va'omer. This is fascinating because we have a Mishnah that says mishekara va'omer hutra achodosh. Yeah, it's supposed to remember again. Karban omer brought on the second day of Pesach from the first barley that's grown. What the Karban Omer allows is for the consumption of chadash. Chadash means any grain which has grown since last Pesach until the current Pesach is called chadash, new crop, only becomes permissible for consumption once the Karban Omer is brought. Now I will say immediately once the Karban Omer is brought, you're allowed to eat chadash. So I will say that works fine for people who lived in proximity to the Beis HaMikdash. You knew when the Omer was offered. What happens if you lived far away from the Beis HaMikdash? How do you know when to eat chadash? So the Gemara says, Mechatzos hayom ve'elach. So ultimately, again, we assume that the Karban Omer was already offered no later than Chatzos. Even if you live far away, you've received no word from the Beis HaMikdash, you can eat your Karban Omer, you can eat your chadash, from midday and on. The Gemara says, "V'hal chadash da'oraisahu." But I will say chadash is a da'oraisa. V'katani harachoki mutar mechatzal yom ve'elach. And yet we say that even those who are from the Beis HaMikdash could eat chadash from midday and on. Now, why is that? Lav mishum chazaka shleach oseh shlichuso. So we'll say, if I live far away from the Beis HaMikdash and I have no way of getting word about when the Karban Omer was brought, the Mishnah says I could eat chadash from midday and on. Why could I eat chadash from midday and on? Because obviously there's a chazaka that the Karban Omer was brought. Did I see it? Did I see it? Was I there? Of course not. So what do you see from here? Chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. That there's a chazaka that a shliach carries out his agency. So Rav Shesha says, this is where I see the concept of chazaka oseh shliach. So Rav say, remember again, all Rav Shesha needs to do, just to be clear, all you need to do is prove that chazaka works by daraisas, and what? Certainly it'll work by dirabbanans. So therefore, he's just proven that chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso works by a dorais. In this case, the dorais being chadash. If it works by dorais, it certainly works by dirabbanans. Rav Nachman Abba say who holds that it doesn't work by doraisas, only works by dirabbanans. What will he say? Hasam kidiktani taima lefi sheyodin shin beis din misatzlin. So Rav Nachman says this is not a fair case. They both say in this case, this is not just a regular case of chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. This is the Beis Din. This is the Sanhedrin. This is the Kohanim. Meaning you have an especially diligent and vigilant group of people overseeing this process. So yes, Rav Nachman would say, even I would agree that you could rely that the Beis Din, the Sanhedrin, the Kohanim, get the job done in an appropriate way. But in general, we say we don't say chazaka shliach oseh shlichus. So in general, there's no way to know if someone did something unless you actually see them do it. Vigedamri, we'll say there's another version of this discussion. Amar Rav Nachman says, Mena'am minallah. So Rav Nachman says, from where do I know that in general we hold Ein chazaka shliach ose shlichuso, or chazaka in shliach ose shlichuso. No, ein chazaka shliach ose shlichuso. How to know that in general, there's no chazaka that the agent executes his agency unless you explicitly see that he did. So the Gemara says, Diktani taima lefi sheyodin shein bezdin misatzlin bo. Bezdin hu dvelo misatzlin bo, hashaliach misatzavah. Because Rav Nachman says, look in the case of chadash, karban omer. The only reason why faraway places are permitted to eat chadash as of chatzos is because it's bezdin who's on top of it. But were bezdin not to be on top of it, then halacha lamaisa, you would not rely on any kind of chazaka. But Rav Sheshes would say, Amar Lacha, Bezdin ad palgi di yomei, shliach kul yomei. Rav Sheshes says, no, the only difference over here is that Bezdin gets the job done quickly. But you could still assume that the shaliach is going to get the job done. So Bezdin will get it done by chatzos. A shaliach may take the entire day. So we'll say this is very interesting. See, even Rav Sheshes who holds chazaka shliach ose shlichuso, right? Even Rav Sheshes who holds that we can assume that the shaliach does his avoda, his agency, might hold that he might not do it with zrizos. He'll get the job done. He's going to take his time doing it. It's fascinating. On Rav Sheshes, Menamina. So again, we'll say we'll try again. Rav Sheshes says, so from where do I know that we hold chazaka shliach ose shlichuso by da'araisas and d'rabbanans? Disanya. We'll say this is also fascinating. Ha'isha she'esha le'alei oziva. If a woman has to bring a carbon. So again, the case you're talking about over here is a woman has to bring a pair of birds, right? A bird pair, either for a carbon after birth or a carbon after being purified from zivus. So what's the halacha? Mevia ma'os v'nosenes b'shofar v'toveles v'ocheles b'kachum le'erev. So what could she do? Say? So she brings the money for her carbon. She deposits it in the shofar. So we'll say, those of you who are with us for the last cycle of Daf Yomi, remember in Masechah Shkalim, right, which was incredible Masechta, and the one Yerushalmi Masechta that's part of the Bavli cycle. So remember again, they had what they call these shofros. These shofros were tzedakah boxes, but they were interesting tzedakah boxes in that they were wide at the top, narrow at the bottom, so that you didn't have the ability to go ahead and reverse. You didn't have the ability to reach your hand in order to take out. So what happens? A woman has to bring a carbon after birth. So what would happen? Look at Rashi, v'nosenes b'shofar, shekasav alav kinin, shesham nosnin ma'os kinei chova. So what would happen? They would have a particular tzedakah box that was marked bird pairs. So what would a woman do? She would deposit her money into the tzedakah box. She would immerse in the mikvah, and that night she would eat kachim. She would be tahora. She'd eat kachim. Because what did she assume? That her carbon was offered on her behalf. She assumed she deposited the money, her carbon was offered. Now both say, now what does that mean? Chazaka shliach ose shlichuso. Obviously what she's saying is, I'm going to go to the mikvah and I'm going to eat kachim, sacrificial items, based on the idea that because I deposited the money, the Kohanim offered up my karbanas that day. So the Gemara says, my time, the reason she can do that is because there's a chazaka that a shaliach does shlichus. So both says that's a pretty good raya. Rav Nachman will say, Kid Rav Shmaya, the Amar Rav Shmaya, Chazaka in Bezin Shakahanim Omde Mishan Ad Shichlu Kalamau Shemashofar. So we'll say, so once again, Rav Nachman will say this is not a fair example. This is by Kohanim. We have a general principle by Kohanim of Kohanim Zrizimheim, that the Kohanim are considered to be very diligent and vigilant. So because of that, the Kohanim don't go home for the day until they know that all of the karbanos have been offered based on the money that's been deposited in the shofros. So because you have Kohanim who are on top of this, therefore halacha lemaisa, that's why there's a chazaka that is getting done. But you can't apply this case of Kohanim to a regular case of shlichus, to which the Gemara says, Rav Sheshes menamina. So we'll try again about Rav Sheshes says, okay, try once more. How do I know that we say chazaka shliach ose shlichuso by the oraisas and certainly by the rabbanans as well? The sanya omer lechavero say belakit lechatein imiteinasi. This is actually very interesting. So if I go over to my friend and I say to him, listen, go take some figs from my figs. I have a fig orchard, if that's the right word, right? I have a fig orchard, I have fig trees. I say to my chaver, say, Ruvain, go help yourself to some figs. But I don't tell Ruvain how much. Right? I don't tell him a measure. Rashi says over here, I do not give him any amount for the amount of figs that he's permitted or not permitted to take. So what happens? So as it says, the Gemara, so what happens? So Reuven, when he takes, is permitted to go ahead and eat from the figs, achilas arai. And I both say, look at Rashi's moment. Arai means a snack, not a meal. He could eat a snack from the figs that he harvested. Why? Look at Rashi. Arai below meiser ukishabala achlon keva maasrin vaday meisros maasrin vaday meisros vaday shruman gedola b'chol dinei afrosh shein savik lomer shram bala bayis iser alein b'mokam acher the halo yoda kamaliket. Supposed to listen to this. So I have a fig tree. I tell Reuven, help yourself to some figs. I don't tell Reuven how many figs or what measure of figs. So Reuven takes figs. When he goes ahead and he eats a snack, no problem. The moment he decides to eat them as part of a meal, he must separate out trumas and maisrus. And I both say, because we assume that the produce that he took is totally untithed. How do we know that it's totally untithed? Because I both say, since I, the owner of the tree, did not know how many figs he took, right? How much he took, there's no way to assume that I tithed the produce that he took, because I have no idea how much produce he took. So because of that, therefore, Allah Chalamai says considered to be totally untithed produce, and Reuven's got to separate out shumas and maisrus. However, but if I say to Reuven, help yourself to a basket full of dates. And let's say also we're presupposing over here that a basket is a defined amount. So I say, Reuven, do me a favor, help yourself to a basket full of figs. Ocha mehen arai umeasrin damai. He is permitted to eat a snack, because also remember again, food doesn't really become subject to trumas and maisrus if you're just eating it achilas arai. So he can eat it as a snack even without doing anything. But halacha lamaisa, once he wants to eat it as part of a meal, he tithes it as one would tithe demai. Now, both remember again, when demai means the produce of an ama aretz. So we assume that an ama aretz goes there and separates out truma gedola, just doesn't separate out the other tithes. So you have to now separate it as, you have to now tithe it as demai. Both say, look at Rashi for just a moment. Aval amar lo malei lechal kalkalazu, hoil v'nosin zeyodea kamaloket. Since I, the owner of the tree, know exactly how much Reuven is taking, yesh lomar zehanosin choshish shema yismoch alav sheitin lo davar heter. So both say, so what's the concern? I now know how much Reuven is taking from the tree. He's taking a basket full. So now I'm concerned, does Reuven think that I've tithed the produce already? So because of that, Hilchach melaked ze ocha mehen arai below meiser ukishabala ochlan keva intzarach laasran vada ela demai yafresh v'ochul batza meiser shalevi v'shal ani kishalo kemer. So let's listen to this. So in this case over here, where I know how much he's taking, there's almost an assumption here that I am tithing the produce on his behalf. So both say, so listen to this. When is this so? When is this so? Pa'am haaretz. So both say this ultimately again is only so when in other words, when do you have to go ahead and separate out produce? Separate out trumas and maisras like demai. That's with an ama aretz. That's with an ama aretz. Because both say because ultimately again, Rashi says, "Shanosin ama aretzu ve'ena choshish b'lifnei iver." So we'll say that's true if I, the owner of the fig tree, am an ama aretz. That's when the person, when Reuven who takes it, has to tithe it like demai. Because if I'm an ama aretz, I can't necessarily rely. Reuven, can't rely that the owner of the fig tree tithed it. However, b'chaver, but if the owner of the fig tree was a Talmud Chacham, ochel, Reuven can eat of the figs. And there is no need for him to tithe anything else. These are the words of Rebbe. So when is this so? Ba'am ha'aretz. This is only true ultimately again with an ama aretz. However, if you look at Rashi just a moment, so Shimon says, when is this so? When the giver is an ama aretz. Aval b'chaver, but if the giver is a Talmud Chacham, Eino ochel ad aser, the taker, in this case Reuven, the recipient, cannot eat of the produce until he properly tithes. Why? Shelo nechshedu chaverim litrom shalom min amokaf. Because ultimately, again, a Talmud Chacham is not suspected to tithe with produce that is not in proximity. I will say a word about this. Technically speaking, you could tithe produce even if it's not in front of you. So let's say I'm over here and I have a silo in Towson. So technically speaking, I could separate out fruit here or produce here as trumas and maisrus on produce that is in a different geographic location, but it is not ideal. That is not the way we like to conduct ourselves when it comes to Trumas and Maasros. The idea is to separate out tithes directly from this. So we'll say this is actually quite fascinating. So we have competing issues over here. According to one approach, a Talmid Chacham, when the owner of the produce is a chaver, a Talmid Chacham, and he's giving this produce to an Amma Aretz, what is he most concerned about? He's most concerned that the Amma Aretz is going to think that the produce is tithed. Therefore, again, what is the Talmid Chacham going to do? He's going to tithe it. The second opinion says, no, a Talmid Chacham would never tithe produce that's not in his proximity. Therefore, if you're getting it from a Talmid Chacham, you have to assume that it's untithed. Amar Rabbi, Nirin Dvarai Midivrei Abba. Rabbi said, I think I'm more correct than ultimately, again, Abba. Mutav sheyachshedu chaver mishron shalom namukov v'lo yachilu la'ami aretz tvalim. So we'll say, because Rabbi says, it is better, both sides. So essentially, if you are, this is fascinating, if you are the Talmid Chacham owner of the fig tree, so let's just be clear. Here's what's happened. Reuven is the Talmid Chacham owner of the fig tree. He tells Shimon, take a basket of figs. Shimon takes the basket of figs. Now, Reuven, the Talmid Chacham owner, has these two competing issues. I could go ahead and leave it untithed, because now for me to tithe that basket is tithing produce that's not in my proximity, and that's not good. But if I do that, then what? Then it's potentially lifnei iver, stumbling block, because Shimon may think that I tithed. Or I can go ahead and tithe shalom and amokaf, which is a less than ideal form of tithing, but ultimately, again, save Shimon from any potential chait. So the Gemara says, Ad kan lo pligi. So we'll say, hear that tension? We're going to see what that tension really is. We're supposed to know what that tension is. That tension is it better to do something less ideal, personally less ideal, but save someone else from transgression? Or is it better to live your life l'chatchila and let the other person worry about himself? It's a fun, we're going to see this in just a moment. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, Ad kan lo pligi ela demar savar nechshadu amar savar lo nechshadu. So we'll say right now the machlokes only is, remember, let's keep targeted over here. The machlokes only is whether or not we assume that a chaver will take truma shalom in amukaf, not in proximity or not. Aval kuli alma chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. But we'll say at the end of the day, what comes out of this is the concept ultimately of shliach oseh shlichusa. We'll see if you look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, lo nechshadu lichom shalom amokov halav hachi vada hayesamchinun abalabayezer shu shaliach. So listen to this. So what's fascinating about this is as follows. And I will say, how do you see from this case shliach oseh shlichuso? How would you see that? Because I will say, were it not for the issue of taking truma shalom in hamukov, it would appear that we would definitely rely on the owner to tithe his produce, right? The only obstacle over here is to assuming that the owner tithed his own produce is that it's shalom in amukov, is that the produce that is now in the basket, that is in the hands of Shimon, is no longer in the presence of Reuven. But were it not for that particular issue, we absolutely would assume that Reuven would tithe his produce, even on behalf of. So we'll say, what is that? That's chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. Rav Nachman, so we'll say that's a pretty good proof to Rav Sheshes. This is a doraisa. Yet we see that chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. Rav Nachman would say, Hasam kid Rav Chanina choza. Da'am Rav Chanina choza. Chazakahu al chaver she'ena motzi davar she'ena metuka mitachas yado. So we'll see, it's actually very interesting. Rav Chanina choza says there's something different over here. The difference over here is that a chaver is very careful never to allow anything untithed to leave his hand. This is not a din in shlichus. This is a din that a chaver holds himself up. He has a certain status. So because of that, he does not maintain, or certainly does not dispense, untithed produce. When is this so? Ba'ama aretz. Shabbos say, when is this so? When we're dealing ultimately with an Amma Aretz, Aval b'chaver, ochel ve'ino tzarech la'asra divrei Rebbe. I will say, but if it's a chaver, you could go ahead and eat the produce, and there's no need to tithe. Hai Amma Aretz deka amar le leman. So we'll say, where is the Ama Aretz in this relationship? Ilema de Kamar Lama Aretz Chavrei. I'm sorry. Ilema de Kamar Lama Aretz Chavrei Ma'asron Demai Mitzayis. So we'll say, if you want to say that ultimately, again, we're going to tell the Ama Aretz that he has to tithe his Demai. Let's remember again, an Ama Aretz is someone who doesn't tithe altogether. So at least, or I shouldn't say altogether. He's a person in general who's not careful with tithing. So if you tell him to tithe, is he going to listen? Ella ba'ama aretz de ka'amar le lechaver. But rather, it must be the Ama Aretz says it to the chaver. I ema seifa mirin dvarai midivrei Abba. But what Rebbe said, I think my words are more correct over Abba. Mutav shiyach shedu chaverim litrom shalom min amokov va'al yachilu la'ame aretz tivalin. When we said that it is better for a chaver to be suspected of separating a trumas and maasros from produce that is not in proximity, rather to place a stumbling block in front of Ame Aretz Tevel. So the Gemara says, I don't understand, but you just told me that it's the Ame Aretz who's the owner of the produce. So Ame Aretz my buy hasam. So here's the clarity. Amar Ravina, it's two different cases. Reisha ba'ama Aretz sha'amar lechaver. The first part of the Mishnah Abose is talking about an Ame Aretz who owns the produce, and ultimately again gives it to the chaver. Seifa b'chaver sha'amar la'ama aretz b'chaver acher shom'o. The Seifa is talking about a chaver who gives produce to the Ama Aretz, and now a chaver, another chaver, overhears the conversation and wants to go ahead and have some of the produce given from the chaver to the Ama. So we'll say, so there's a chaver who gives to the Ama Aretz, another chaver who overhears that chaver is giving to Am Haaretz, and he wants some of the produce of the Am Haaretz. So let's say, so what happens over here? Rebbe Savar Amud Beis. So Rebbe holds Osa Chaver Ochel Veino Tzarech La'aser. So we'll say, so Rebbe holds that second chaver, right? So the second chaver is the friend of the Ama Aretz recipient. So the second chaver, who's the friend of the Ama Aretz recipient who wants some produce, what's the halacha? Ochel Veino Tzarech La'aser. He could eat and he does not have to take meiser or trumas meiser. Why? Devadai isurei maaser. Au chaver kamai alai iluya. Because we certainly rely on the fact that the original chaver owner of the produce properly tithed all of his produce. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Lo yochal ad aser. No, the second chaver, who's the friend of the Ama Aretz recipient, cannot eat of the produce until he takes Shumas and Maasros. Why? Because we don't assume that a chaver will separate out Shumas and Maasros from produce that is not in his proximity. Rabbi say, do you hear this fascinating machlokes? It's a machlokes just about human behavior. So we'll say, so the case, this machlokes case is where you have a chaver owner of the produce. So chaver, we'll just call him chaver. Chaver says to his friend, hey, Ama Aretz. I don't think he calls that, it's just descriptive, right? Ama Aretz, take a basket of figs from my fig tree. So Ama Aretz takes a basket of figs. Chaver too, who's a friend of Ama Aretz recipient, hears what's going on. He goes over to Ama Aretz friend. He says, hey, can I have some of the dates? Ama Aretz says, of course, he's a very sharing guy. Give some dates. So the shaila now is, what does Chaver 2 have to do with the dates? So opinion number 1 says that halacha l'maisa, Chaver 2 doesn't have to do anything with the dates because we assume that a chaver never lets untithed produce leave his home. Whatever leaves his home is properly tithed. It's properly tithed. Opinion 2 says, no, chaver 2 does have to tithe the produce. Why? Because a chaver holds himself to the highest standards of halacha, and the highest standards of halacha dictate that you do not take trumas and maasros from produce that is not in your proximity. And therefore we cannot assume that the basket of dates that the Ama Aretz took has been tithed by the Talmud Chacham. So we'll say, here we go. Rebbe says, Mutav sheyachshedu chaverim litrom shalom min amukov va'al yachilu ame artza. And Rebbe says no. As we'll say, essentially, if it's a choice between the Talmud Chacham doing something that is less than optimal versus dispensing untithed produce, which would be an incredible stumbling block for others, we assume that the Talmud Chacham does something less than optimal and removes the stumbling block from his fellow Jew. But my kamif, the Yisrael will say, here it is. And this is perhaps, this I think is a profound life machlokes that many of us struggle with each and every day. Watch this. Rebbe Savar, Nechale lechaver, Dele Ovid hu isura kilila, v'lo le'ovid Ama Aretz isiraba. So also listen to this. Rebbe holds, it is better for the Talmud Chacham. Now his lashon is to commit a minimal isser, so that the Amaretz should not go ahead and commit a major isser. But I would reframe it a little bit. It is better for the Talmid Chacham to do something less than optimal, because it's not really an isser so much, rather than not doing something optimal. It is better for the Talmid Chacham to do something very unoptimal. I don't know if that's a word. Unoptimal? Inoptimal? Unoptimal. Good. So it says it's very better for the Talmid Chacham to do something unoptimal if it saves someone else from committing an isser. So do we want you tithing your produce without the produce in front of you? Do we want you tithing the produce when it's not in your proximity? Absolutely not. But if it's a choice of you doing something b'di'evet, that's b'di'evet, highly b'di'evet, but it saves someone else from committing an isser, better for you to do the b'di'evet and save someone else from stumbling. That's Rebbe. Bless you. Rav Shimon Gamliel Savar, Nechale lechaver deli avet ama'aretz isura rabba. V'ihu afilu isur kalila lo avid. First, Rav Shimon Gamliel says no. It is better to save yourself from committing even the smallest infraction, or from doing something less than optimal. And you know what? The other person has to worry about his own cheshbon. Rabbi say, isn't this a fascinating machlokes? In life, do we say, look, you have to look out for yourself, and you have to be lechatchila in every single way. What is your lechatchila going to do for someone else? That's not my problem. Not that I don't care about you, not that I don't love you. Of course I care about you, but I have to look out for my neshama. You have to look out for your neshama, and I have to take responsibility to be lechatchila. My lechatchila may place certain stumbling blocks for you. Let's say, I want to be clear. It's called achrayus. It's called responsibility. I'm not placing any stumbling blocks before you. You have to be careful also. Just like I have to be careful, you have to be careful. So my lechatchila could put you in a potential stumbling situation. Well, be careful. Don't stumble. Live life with your halachic eyes open. Right? Go ahead and be attentive. So that's Rav Shimon Gamliel. Shimon says, we'll say in life, you have to worry about your neshama. And you have to be a lechatchila Jew in every single way. Your lechatchila could place a stumbling block in front of someone else. I have to worry about my neshama. You have to worry about your neshama. Rebbe says no. Rebbe says, if it means that you have to give a little bit of yourself in order to go ahead and protect the other, that is a sacrifice worth making. It is worth giving up your lechatchila and being a little bit of a b'di'evet in order to ensure that someone else doesn't stumble. I will say, what a profound life machlokes. You think it's a machlokes just about Shumas and Maestras. It's a machlokes in how we live. Don't we encounter this every single day? If I would choose to focus inward, I could be such a holier person. I could be such a better person. But I want to give time to this one or help out this one. But that time, if it's spent on me, imagine where I would be in life if I could devote my kochos inward. So what's better? Is it better to build myself into the best version of myself? And look, I love you, I care about you, and when I can help you without it being a detriment to me, I'm there. But if it's a detriment to me, I'm going to have to focus on building myself. I want to be clear, not in a selfish way, not in an arrogant way, not that I don't care, I don't love you, but my job is to make myself the best, Tzelem Elokim, the best version of God, or image of God that I can be. Or do I say, no, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my best to build myself into my best. But again, when my best creates a stumbling block for you, I'd rather know that I'm helping you preserve where you are than build myself up. And I both say it's a fascinating life machlokes. Obviously, it's not a right or wrong. Different times call for different things. There are certain times in life where a person must devote their kochos inward. Where again, I have to build myself up, because if I build myself up, I will be better for everyone else later on. So there are times where I have to build myself up, but there are times where you give up your lechatchila, in order to save someone else from tripping over a stumbling block. An incredible life machlokes. So I will say, so nu halacha l'maisa, how do we paskin? I don't mean in this. In this, we know how we paskin. We paskin like both the bases. We paskin both like Rebbe and Rav Shimon Gamliel. I mean, chazak shliach oseh shlichuso. How do we paskin? We have a burning machlokes. Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes. Rav Nachman telling us you only say chazak shliach oseh shlichuso by dirabanans, not by daraisas. Rav Sheshes telling me that there's a chazaka that a shliach does shlichus even by daraisas. So which one is this? Well, let's listen to this. This halacha or this machlokes actually appears in a lot of different places. The tour in Yoredeya in Hilchos Trumas and Maestros Simin Shin Lamed Aleph, Sif Lamed Dalid writes as follows. Listen to this. Kasav Harambam. I'm going to do this quickly because of time. Yeah, very quickly because of time. Extremely quickly because of time. So the Torah writes, Kasav Harambam, Ham Omer Shluchot Seva Tarim. If a person says to his shaliach, go and separate out truma for me. A simple case, we'll say, I have produce, I haven't tithed it. I say to my shaliach, do me a favor, go out and tithe my produce for me. Halach litrum ve'eni odem taram im lo taram umatz a karav tarum. So we'll say, let's say what happens. So I say, Reuven, go tithe my produce. I don't watch him. I go to work. I come home and I see that the pile of grain has been tithed. Says the Rambam, ein chazaka, ein chazkas o tarum, she'ein omrim chazkas shliach oseh shlichusa lahakil, ela lahachmir. So we'll say the Rambam paskins, essentially, we do not say chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. For lekula, only lechumra. V'choshesh, so what are we worried about? V'choshesh shema tarum acher shalo birshus. We'll say this is fascinating. For 1 second, I told Reuven to tithe my produce. I went to work, I came home, the pile's been tithed. Isn't that pretty good evidence that the shliach did? No, what do we assume in halacha? Someone else came along and tithed it. It wasn't Reuven. Someone else came. And I will say the halacha by truma is if somebody tithes your produce without your command, without being appointed by you, it is not a proper tithing. So essentially, the Rambam paskins that we hold ein chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. We do not make a chazaka that a shliach does his shlichus, with the exception of where it's l'chumra. So we'll say, for example, I'll tell you where this comes. Where's a good case of where it's l'chumra? By gittin. Ultimately, again, so if we say this chazaka, that a shliach does the shlichus ultimately, again, of delivering the get, because that would be an example, ultimately, again, of l'chumra. He gives other examples. He quotes other opinions who halacha l'maisa disagree with this, but l'maisa, the Rambam himself, the Torah seems to codify the position of the Rambam, that halacha l'maisa, yeah, I'm sorry, not Gittin. I'm sorry, Kiddushin. So the Beis Yosef quotes this. He says, "Ahad the Kamar Hasam haomer the shluchot seva kadosh leisha." We'll say, what's the chumrah? A man says to shaliach, "Go and find me a wife." So we'll say, what's the halacha? So there's only one problem. What's the only problem? Shaliach never comes back. And never tells me. So what's the halacha in that case? So aser b'chol nashim sheba olam. Ultimately, again, he has to assume that every single woman is his wife, right? So we'll say, so therefore that gets into an issue of marrying sisters and things like that. So that's l'chumra. That's chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. That's l'chumra ba'onelkos. So we'll say halacha l'maisa. It appears that is how the halacha is formulated. That's at least the Torah Shumas Maestros, that we essentially paskin like Rav Nachman. That halacha l'maisa, at least in da'oraisas, we will not say chazaka shliach oseh shlichuso. Maybe by dirabbanans. Generally, we'll only say it l'chumra, not l'kula. Incredible. Mishnah. Nasnu be'ilan l'mala me'asar tvachim ein eruv eruv. So we'll say if you go and you place your eruv in a tree. So we'll say, so remember again, we're talking about over here. Well, we'll see what we're talking about, but whatever, you're placing your eruv. Let's say your eruv tchumen. You're placing it in a tree. Okay? So we'll say, so now, remember, I need to establish my makom shavisa, my domicile, in order to go ahead and extend my tchum. So nasnu be'ilan l'mala me'asara. If I place the food in the tree above 10 tfachim, ein eruva eruv. The eruv is not valid. Lamata me'asar tfachim. If I place it below 10 tfachim, eruva eruv, then the eruv is good. Nasnu babar afilu amok me'ama. If I place the eruv food in a pit, even if the pit is 100 amas deep, eruva eruv. Ultimately, again, the eruv is good. So the Gemara says, what's going on over here? Yosef Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Bar Nosam, Yosef Rav Nachem Gabayu. So we'll say all of these great rabbanim were sitting together, and they said as follows: Hai Elon dekoi hecha. So we'll say this tree that we're talking about. So interesting enough. So the Mishnah says, if you deposit your eruv in the tree, if you deposit it lamala above 10 tfachim, eruv's not good. Below 10 tfachim, the eruv is good. So 1 second, where is the tree? Ilema dekai b'rishos hayachid. If you want to tell me that the tree is in the rishos hayachid, mali lamala, mali lamata. Rishos hayachid ola ad rakia. So we'll say, if you tell me that the tree is situated in a private domain in Rishos hayachid, airspace of Rishos hayachid goes all the way up to the heavens. So what does it matter if it's above 10 tfachim, below 10 tfachim? Either way, again, that tree is considered to be within Rishos hayachid. So again, the height of where you place the eruv shouldn't really make any difference. Vela dekai b'rishos harabim. Rather, what must you say? you must say that halacha l'maisa, the tree is situated in the Rishus Harabim. To which the Gemara says, okay, so now I have a tree in Rishus Harabim. Supposed to remember again, generally, so Rishus Harabim goes up to where? Up to 10 tefachim in airspace, right? You only have 10 tefachim of airspace in Rishus Harabim. So now, let's understand. So the Gemara says, Vel d'kai Rishus Harabim, de miskavim lishbos heicha. So we'll say, where am I intending to establish my makom shavisa? So when I place that food in the tree, where am I establishing my domicile? The Gemara says, if you want to say ultimately again that my intention, let's say I place the Eruv 11 tefachim high, and I intend that my makom shvisa should be on that branch. I mean, that's my domicile. My domicile is that branch where the Eruv is resting. That's fine. Why? Because hu ve'eruva b'makom echad hu. But say that's not a problem because then both me and my Eruv are in the same rishus. Elin is kavin lishbos lamata. Rather, what you have to say is what? My kavana was to establish a makom shvisa on the ground. But the problem is I put my Eruv where? L'mal of 10 tvachim. So we'll say now what's the problem? Now let's go back. Where is the tree situated? Where is it situated? Rishus Harabim. I've now placed the food where? On the tree, but above 10 tvachim, which essentially means what Rabbi say? My food is in Rishus Hayachid. Rashi points out the assumption over here is that the tree has a width of 4 tefachim, so therefore it has the dimensions of a Rishus Hayachid. So now the problem is I've placed my food effectively in Rishus Hayachid, and I am in Rishus Harabim, which means that my food is inaccessible to me. If my food is inaccessible to me, then the Eruv is not good. The Gemara says, 1 second, V'ha kamishtamish be'ilan. So what's about? I don't understand. Even in any case, Rabbi say, even if you want to tell me that halacha l'maisa, my intention is to establish my makom shvis in the tree, how could I access the Eruv? I can't climb a tree on Shabbos. So we'll say, look at Rashi for just a moment. So we'll say, in general, no matter where my makom shvis is, even if my makom shvis is in the tree, l'maisa at the end of the day, I'm using a tree on Shabbos. And you can't use a tree on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, even if I place, whether I establish a makom shvisa above yud or whether I place the eruv lamata miyud, the eruv still shouldn't be good because the ability to access the eruv requires usage of a tree, and usage of a tree is asur on Shabbos. Rashi says, "V'halo matzi shakele deshimush ilan shavusu ki disnan." Eluhein mishum shabus lo olin be'ilan v'hu avdin dematzi lemifrach v'ha kamaisi mikarmelis rishus harabim elakebam dehu shabus v'ha shabus chadam einaragis. So let's listen to this. The usage of a tree on Shabbos is an isser midrabanan, what we call a shavus. Why can't you use a tree on Shabbos? What are we concerned about? You may come to break off a branch. That's the concern. So in general, how are you even able to? So we'll say if I deposit my eruv on a tree, pretty much that eruv should be invalid from the beginning because there's no halachically permissible way for me to access it on Shabbos, because accessing it requires usage of a tree. Usage of a tree is asr, to which the Gemara says, so we'll say, really, what's the case? The case is where I'm intending to make my makom shavisa, the tree is standing in Rishus Harabim. That's Aleph. Beis, my intention is to put my eruv lamata miyud. What does that do? That places the Eruv in the same domain that I am. Lamata miyud is Rishus Harabim. So I'm in Rishus Harabim, my Eruv is in Rishus Harabim. What about the problem of using the tree? Watch this. V'Rebbehi. And our Mishnah reflects the view of Rebbe. What does Rebbe say? The Amar kol davar shehu mishum shavus lo gazru alav ben hashmashas. Also listen to this. Rebbe holds that in general, Isurim dirabanan don't apply ben hashmashas, which is very interesting. Rashi says, Ben Hashmosha Shahayos Shas L'Kiniyos. So we'll say Rebbe holds that essentially Isurim D'Rabbanan don't apply Ben Hashmoshas. Why is this important for me? Rebbe will say, when does Eruv take effect? Ben Hashmoshas. That's all you need. As long as your Eruv is in place, Ben Hashmoshas, you're good to go for the rest of Shabbos. So we'll say we know this because if your Eruv is there Ben Hashmoshas, then let's say the food gets ruined or the food gets stolen or an animal eats it, your Eruv is good. Eruv is locked in Ben Hashmoshas. So we'll say Rebbe holds that essentially anything that's Asr Midrabanan is not going to be Asr Ben Hashmoshas. Therefore, since Ben Hashmoshas you can access the Eruv is good for the rest of Shabbos. So again, the case of the Mishnah is, I'm in Rishus Harabim, There are rather trees in Rosh Hashanah. So therefore the Mishnah says, if you place the food lamata miyud, the Eruv is good because you and the food are in the same Rishus. Lamala miyud, the Eruv is not good because you and the food are in different Rishuyos. How could I access the Eruv at all? After all, it's on a tree. It's Rebbe who holds that Isurei D'Rabbanan rabbinic prohibitions, like using a tree on Shabbos, are not in effect ben hashmashas. Therefore, during the ben hashmashas period, I can access the Eruv, and therefore halacha l'maaseh is permitted. Amru Rav Nachman, Yasher. All right, they said to Rav Nachman, Shkoyach, excellent job, very well, very, very good interpretation. V'chein Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said this as well. Amru lei pasrayu bekulehai. So they said to him, they said to Rav Nachman, did you investigate this matter so fully that you feel confident about this explanation? You could even say Shmuel said it as well. So we'll say the rabbis who were asking Rav Nachman, they also, everybody investigated this well and came to the same conclusion. What they were asking Rav Nachman was, what they were saying to him was, Kavisule b'Gemara. Did you establish this as part of formal teaching? Amr lahu in. And he said, Rav Nachman said back to them, yes. And I was supposed to say, so they were just going, they were all in agreement. They just wanted to figure out if this exactly was the final answer or not. To which Rav Nachman said, yes, not only again did I learn it this way, but it's established as Gemara, it established as our final teaching. But we'll stop over here for today. Well, the Meretz Hashem pick up. Actually, no, let's just finish. The Gemara says, Itmar Nami, Amr Nachman, Amr Shmuel, Hacha Be'ilan Ha'omer B'Rishus HaRabim Maskinan. Again, here, we'll say, just states it more formally. What are we dealing with over here? We're dealing with an ilan, a tree that is standing in Rosh Hashanah. Gavoa asav arachav arba. The tree itself is 10 tefachim high, 4 tefachim wide. V'niskavim lishbos lamata. And you want to make your makom shavisa ultimately again in Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe he the Amar kol davar shemishus mishum shavus lo gazral ben hashmashos. And it's Rebbe who holds that Allah l'maaseh the Eruv is accessible because anything that is asr midirabanan will not be asr ultimately again bein hashmashos. Shkach, we'll stop over, pick up over the next sugya Meretz Hashem tomorrow.